A very good morning to all my dear friends. Again, this is your OS lecture, and we are going to today discuss about the threads and the kernels that we use in operating system. So let us just start this topic today about OS kernels and threads. So this is our lecture number 7 in operating system, and today we are going to understand the concept of threads. So here we have today's objectives, which are we are going to learn about the kernels and the threads. What are they? Both have got their different types. So we'll understand what all are the types of the kernels and the threads. Then we'll see the differences which exist in both of them, like in types of kernels, what are the differences, then in threads, what all are the differences. And then we'll see how we used to execute them, how the kernels are executed, how threads are executed. So all of these things we are going to understand today. So let us just understand first of all that what exactly do we mean by threads in operating system. Let me tell you that this thread is actually a flow of execution through the process code with its own program counter. It could be system register, it could be stack. Or, in simple terms, you can say that a thread is nothing but any program which is executing. A program in execution is a thread. And this is the reason a thread is also called a lightweight process. Okay, why lightweight process? Because even if you define a process means a program in execution. So here, because threads are a bit different technology than process, that is why we are calling them lightweighted process. So threads provide you a way to improve the application performance through parallelism. Now this is the key point that the threads offer, which is not present in process. A process never deals with the concurrency part. It never deals with the multitasking part. But when you talk about a thread, it is program and execution, and it is directly impacting the parallelism, right? If in a particular system you are executing parallel processes. Now, in that case, you need to have threads. So, this is where the concept of threads come in, right? Now, every thread belongs to exactly one process, and no thread can exist outside the process. So, this is one important thing, that thread is kind of an internal affair for your process. The process has a single thread, or a process can own a thread. So the existence of a thread is not found outside a process. Once you start a process, the threads will be there to execute it. So there is no scope of thread outside your process. It is meant for your process. It is for your process. So this is a general concept. This is just the introduction of threads. Let us now see the types. We have so many types of threads, like we have single thread process where only a single thread is working inside the process. Then we can have multi-threaded process where multiple threads can work out. So here you can see the diagram. You can see this is the very first diagram, which is showing that it is a single threaded process. So here you can see it is a single threaded process. A single thread is there which is used to execute the process. Similarly, if you see this second part, this is it is a multi-threaded process. Why we are calling it multi-threaded? Because it has got more than one threads inside it. And if you see here, you'll see a common structure in both of these files. Just see that here we have five things, five components are there for every process. For every process, we have five components. What all are they? Excluding threads, we have five processes. One is the code. What is the code? The code of the process for which it is running, the line of codes that we have written. So that is code. What all data and resource it requires, whatever the data it is requiring, those data are there inside the process. Then there are some files, it could be the input file or any kind of output file. So these files are there inside your process. Then some registers to store the values, those could be of 1 byte or 1 bit. So these registers are there to store the values, and a stack which hold the PCB and everything else, whatever the contents are related to this process, it is all held by your stack, right? So these are the important components which make a process completely finishes its execution. And similarly, you can see here also in multi-threaded process, even here also we are finding the same case. The codes are there, the data are there, and the files are there. And here, for specific thread, for every thread we have two things. One is the registers, and for one is the stack. So you see here there are three total threads, and for every thread we have a stack, we have a register. Here also register stack. But all three of them are sharing code, data, and files together. So these three are the common components: code, data, and files. And registers and stacks are operated separately. So these are the differences between the single threaded processes and the multi-threaded processes. Now, uh, let us just quickly understand that what is the difference between processes and threads. So, when we talk about a process, it is it is a heavyweight or it is resource intensive. As I told you that it is automatically heavy in itself, like the whole code which is running, the whole tie-ups, the whole fetching, accessing, each and everything which is related to the execution of a program, it is all considered to be a part of process. Whereas if we talk about thread, as I already told you the definition, it says that a thread is a lightweight process which is taking lesser resources than a process. So a thread doesn't need to have that much of resources because we are already providing it like register, stack, data, files. All of them are already there inside the thread. Then the second point comes, which says the process switching needs interaction with operating system. So what happens in process switching? Process switching, as I told you in the last lecture, in sixth lecture, that what happens is, let's say if a process is running, then suddenly it happens sometimes that a high priority task or a process comes in. Then in that case, the running process is interrupted and it is temporarily picked up from the random access memory and it is saved in the secondary memory for a while until the high priority task gets executed. So this, this to and fro communication or to and fro transportation from the random access memory to your secondary memory and then from secondary memory to your primary memory, this switching is called process switching. So for doing this, it needs to have interaction with the operating system. So what exactly this point means is a process a process needs to spend the time, it takes up a lot of time in interacting with your operating system, because without the permission of operating system, neither a process can interrupt, nor you can do the switching part, nor you can fetch the data from here and there. So a lot of time it get wasted while process switching occurs, just because the process needs to interact with your operating system. Whereas if we see the threads, now in thread switching, it does not need to interact with the operating system. So, when a particular thread is running out, then let's say a multi-threaded scenario is there. So one thread has already run. Let's say second thread wants to run. Then the threads don't have to take any kind of permissions or interactions with your operating system. It can directly do with the help of other threads. So this is one point. Time is not consumed. It is a quicker process in comparison to the processes. Then next will be talk. In multiprocessing environments, each process executes the same code but has its own memory and file resources. We have seen this thing. But when we talk about threads, threads share the same set of open files and the child processes. I have told you in the diagram. Again, see that diagram. See here. All the threads are sharing a same file structure. You can see. However, for every thread, we have given a stack and the registers, but they are sharing the code, data, and files, which is not the case in the processes. Then, if any one of the process is blocked, then no other process can execute until the first process is unblocked. Obviously, we know this thing that due to some lacking information, due to some lack of data or lack of resources or lack of some missing signals and all, a process can block away, rightly block away in the execution area of CPU. So until that process gets unblocked and until it is until the CPU let it out of the critical section, all other process will be waiting. All other process cannot execute. While if we talk about thread, if a thread is blocked and it is waiting, the second thread in the same task can run. This is an important point related to the process and threads. Then there are multiple processes without using threads. They use more resources. And similarly, we talk on the same point of the threads. Multiple threaded processes use very fewer resources. Then, in multiple processes, each process operates independently of the other, and one thread can read, write, or change another thread's data. Now, what all are the advantages of threads and disadvantages of threads? So, see, first of all, we see the advantages of threads. The threads minimizes context switching time. Obviously, recently in the difference part, I told you this thing that when you use a process needs a lot of time for process switching, the context switching time, because it needs to take the permission, it needs to interact with your operating system. But once we talk about the threads, a thread doesn't need to do these kinds of things. It doesn't need to take any kind of permission from the operating system. It doesn't need to have any interaction with the operating system. It does all these things as a owner. It does all these things by its own. That is why the time required for context switching. Context switching is what? The swapping part, where one process is taken up from a RAM to the secondary memory and then back from secondary memory to RAM. So this time is not taken up. Then use of threads basically provides concurrency within a process. Then efficient communication is there using threads. Then if we talk about economy, it is more economical to create and context switch threads. Obviously, we have seen because the operating system is not into that part. So economically, this would be a better situation. Then utilization of multiprocessor architectures to a greater scale and efficiency. This is one of the good advantages of threads. Then, if we talk about disadvantages of threads, it is basically, the blocking of parent threads will stop all the child threads. This is a crucial point here that, every thread has got its parent thread. So once a parent thread get blocked, it's all the child thread will be blocked, right? Not a single, but it will block all the threads. So this is one major big disadvantage of a thread, that making a parent block, it will impact all its child threads. So it will actually impact what the multitasking procedures of the device. And secondly, there's lack of security over threads. However, the processes are very secured category of processes programs, but this is just the missing part in the threads also. Now, when we talk about types of the threads, as we have seen, there are single-threaded mechanisms, multi-threaded mechanisms, but deeply or broadly, if we say, threads are implemented in two ways. One is called the user-level threads, ULT, and another one is called the kernel-level thread, that is KLT. So let us just quickly see what is ULT and KLT. So first we'll understand that what is user level thread. So user level thread basically it implements user level libraries. So thread switching does not need to call operating system and to cause interrupt to the kernel. See, obviously with the name you can understand this thing that it is a user level thread. User level thread means whatever threads are executing, they are executing in the user level libraries. So when when the execution is happening in a user level libraries, there is no there is no what do we say, interference of an operating system. So there, the time is saved, no time consumption is done, because operating system is not taking care of all these things, it is not interrupting in between. So user level threads are that much of important. Now, in fact, the kernel knows nothing about user level threads, and it manages them as if they were single threaded processes. So it has nothing to do with the kernel and the operating system. That is why they are uh, far better to operate. Then what are the advantages of ULT? See, the user level threads does not require modification to operating system. As I told you, there is no interaction of operating system, there is no interruption from OS. That is why they do not require any kind of modification. Now, secondly, if we talk about ULT, it is very easy to implement, represent, and manage. We can manage it very well. Then they can run on any operating system. ULT are the parts which we can run on any kind of operating system. It could be Linux part, it could be Unix, it could be Windows operating system, it could be anything. then they are very fast and efficient just because there is no interruption, there is no interference of operating system here. Then what is the disadvantage of ULT? See, there is a lack of coordination between the threads and the operating system kernel. As I told you in the previous slides that the kernel doesn't even know what is a user level thread. So just because this information is missing, obviously there could not be any kind of coordination between the two things. So that is why this is the major disadvantage, because you know at the end of the day, operating system is the manager of your system, and it has to it has to know what all things are going on inside your operating system. But due to the designing part and the coding part of this user level thread, it is never disclosed to the operating system that what happens in the user level thread. So this is the major reason, this is the lack of coordination which we see inside the user level thread. Now we understand what is kernel level threads. Now see, in this method, the kernel knows about and manages the thread. This is the part. Kernel level threads are the type of threads. As I told you that we have seen in user level threads that the kernel doesn't know anything about user level thread because they are residing in the user libraries. So here there is a difference between this, that the in kernel level thread the kernel already know about the threads, and it is the one which is managing the threads. So no runtime system is needed in this case. An operating system kernel provides system call to create and manage the threads. So here you can see there is a sharp eye of operating system. It can be interrupt in between. It can have interference whenever it wants to, and the kernel know each and every processing of your threads here. So this is the major difference, that in ULT there is as such no kernel's part. Kernel cannot manage anything, but when we talk about a kernel level thread, it is the kernel which is managing all these things. Now, what is the advantage of KLT? Now see, kernel can simultaneously schedule multiple threads from the same processes on multiple process. Now see, if one thread in a process is blocked, the kernel can schedule another thread on the same process. So this is one of the major disadvantage, that the time wasting is not done, or let's say the whole blocking of process cannot be done. It is the role of the KLT, or it is the role of the kernel to handle such kind of situation where a particular process is blocked. So the kernel takes another process or takes another threads into the picture, so as to unblock all the things, or so as to move on. So this is one important thing. Then kernel routine themselves can multi-thread it. So kernel is the one which can take a feature which is called multi-threading, so that a parallelism can be maintained. Parallel tasks, parallel processes can be run at once. So these are some of the advantages of KLT. Then, if we talk about the disadvantage of KLT, see, kernel threads are generally slower to create and manage the threads. Why? Because as I told you, the why they are slower. The speed actually matters here, because see, in user level, because there was no communication, there was no permission sort of thing from the operating system. That is why they don't have to discuss everything. They don't have to report everything to operator and wait for its instruction. So that is a very fast process. Whatever they feel like, whatever a user level thread feel like to decide, it decide by its own that what process it has to take. But here, when we talk about kernel level thread, what happens is it has to seek permission from the operating system every time. Without the permission, without getting the instruction from operating system, it cannot do so. This is why kernel level thread is considered to be, it is slower than the other threads. Now, the kernel requires thread control block for each thread in the pool. Hence, the complexity increases in this case. So these are the two disadvantages. Now, let us just quickly see what is the difference between the ULT and the KLT part. So as I told you, user level threads, ULTs are fast, and KLT in comparison to ULTs are slow in nature. Then they are implemented in thread library at the user level. while the kernel level threads, they are done in the kernel level threads itself by the operating system. Then ULT is basically generic and it can run on any operating system, whereas if we talk about KLT, KLT is specific to the operating system. It is not open to all the operating system. It is just the operating system on which it is operating. So this is the major disadvantage of KLT that we see. Then see, multi-threaded cannot take advantages of multi-processing. So if you are taking multi-level threads, there's a disadvantage that you cannot work on multi-processing. But the kernel routines that we talk about, they are themselves, they can be multi-threaded. So these are the four important and significant differences between the two types of thread, that is user level and kernel level. Now, quickly, we are going to see what all are the different multi-threading models. Some operating system provides a combined user-level threads and kernel-level threads facility. Solaris is a good example of this combined approach. So today we will see what are the three multi-threading models. One is many-to-one, one is one-to-one, and the third one is many-to-many model. Now, first of all, we will see many-to-one model. Now see here, as you can see this diagram, there is a single kernel thread, and to this single kernel thread, there are many user threads. So this is what we call is many to one. Here many means you are talking about ULTs, the user threads. So many user threads are connected to a single kernel thread. So implementation of the many to one model, many user level thread to one kernel level thread. It allows the application to create any number of threads that can execute concurrently. Now in this implementation, all threads activities are restricted to user space, and additionally, only one thread can access the kernel at a time. So only one schedulable entity is known to the others. So this is what we call is a many to one model. Then what is one to one model? Now in this case you can see here. See, this is a single kernel, and to one kernel, only one user thread is associated. Similarly, here also, there is only one kernel, and to this kernel, only a single thread is executed. Right now, the one-to-one model or one user level thread to one kernel level thread is, it is among the earliest implementation of true multi-threading. Now, in this implementation, every user level thread created by the application is known to the kernel itself, and all the threads can access the kernel at the same time. This is a major advantage of this one-to-one model. Now, the next one is many-to-many model. Now, see, in many-to-many model, there are, as you can see in this diagram, there will be too many kernels, more than one kernels will be there, and associated to these kernels, there could be many user level threads. So, see, this the many-to-many model, many user level thread to many kernel level thread, it avoids many of the limitations of one-to-one model while extending multi-threading capabilities even further. The many-to-many model is also called two-level model, which minimizes the programming effort while reducing the cost and the weight of each thread. So this is what we call as a many-to-many model. Now next we are going to understand IPC, or let's say inter-process communication in OS, and it is very significant topic in terms of in terms of operating system. Now what is inter-process communication? See, inter-process communication in multiprocessor system, we are going to see it is used to generate information about certain set of computations finishing on one processor and to let the other processes comes in. They waiting for finishing the computations, take notes of the information, and any process that does not share the data with any other process is independent in nature. So we'll understand what is it. These are the two ways of communicating. Now, let me tell you in a very clear cut concept that what does interprocess communication means. See, interprocess communication means that two processes are communicating with each other for some kind of resource sharing or for information transfer or for some kind of exchange of data. So here you can see, just see, this green part shows two different processes. One is this and one is this. Both of them are interacting with each other, so they can interact. Here, see, this is process A and this is process B. They need to interact with each other, right? Now, for interaction or for for sharing the data or for communication part, there could be two type of things: the shared memory and the message passing. These are the two things that we are seeing. Now, let us understand both of them. Now we'll see shared memory system. Now a shared memory is a memory that may be simultaneously accessed by the multi programs with an intent to provide communication among them or avoid redundant copies. So interprocess communication using shared memory requires communicating processes to establish a region of shared memory. Other processes that wish to communicate using the shared memory segment must attach it to their address space. So this is what we call the shared memory. Then message passing systems. What are message passing systems? See, message passing provides a mechanism to allow processes to communicate and to synchronize their actions without sharing the same address space. So when we take up this message passing scheme, do remember that processes are communicating with each other, but they do not share the same address space. They are sharing a different address space. Like we have seen the example, I'll again show you this example. Just see to it. Here you can see this is a shared memory concept where the two processes are communicating with the help of a shared memory. Both of them are sharing a single memory from which the people are communicating. But when we talk about message passing scheme, you can see these are the two processes and they are not sharing memory with each other. Both of them have got their own address space in which they are working out, in which they are storing their data, they are fetching their data, they are saving their information. So both of them are different. So this was message passing system. Now, see, the messages sent via process can be, either fixed or it could be of variable size. Now, if only fixed size messages can be sent, the system level implementation would be, more straightforward. So here are some methods for logically implementing a link and the send receive option. So what we can do is we can have direct and indirect communication among the processes. We can have synchronous and asynchronous communication. Then we can have automatic or explicit buffering of the messages. So these are the three ways in which the message passing scheme can work out. Now naming. What is the naming procedure in interprocess communication? Now see, under direct communication, every process wants to communicate must explicitly name the recipient or the sender of the communication. So what do direct communication means that the sender and receiver should have their unique identities. Their name should be disclosed directly. So while you are applying the direct communication part, you know who is the sender and you know who is the recipient. Now, second communication is the indirect communication where the messages are sent to and received from the mailboxes or ports. So, in indirect communication, there is no exactly the sender and there is no recipient. Basically, we have the mailboxes or the ports for them. So, the messages are not directly sent to a single entity, they are sent to a particular mailbox or a port. That is why we are calling it indirect communication. Next, the operating system then must provide a mechanism that allows a process to do the following. Now, what are the tasks that it should do? In such a case where you are using indirect communication, you need to create a new mailbox. You need to send and receive messages through these mailboxes. And once the messages have been sent and it has been received at the other end, you need to delete the mailbox so that no other process can access it for any kind of you can say or any kind of interception. So this is one important point. Then the message passing through synchronization of the talk. This is the communication between processes which takes to the calls to send and receive primitive. So here we are taking help of calling mechanism, and message passing may be either blocking and unblocking, also known as synchronous and unsynchronous. Now let's understand what is buffering. Now see, whether communication is direct or it is indirect, the message exchanged by the communicating processes reside in a temporary queue. Right. Now basically such queues can be implemented in three ways. What are the three ways in which it is implemented? One is it can implement in a zero capacity. Now what do you mean by zero capacity? See, the queue has a maximum length of 0. Thus, the link cannot have any messages waiting inside it. So this is what we call is a zero capacity, where the queue is of zero length. Then the bounded capacity. Now, see, if the queue is not full when a new message is sent, the message is placed in the queue and the sender can continue execution without waiting. So this is what we are calling it in a bounded capacity. One was zero capacity, one was bounded capacity. And the third one is called unbounded capacity. So this is what we call as a unbounded capacity. And it is, the queue's length is potentially infinite. Thus, any number of messages can wait in it, so the sender never gets blocked. So these are the three types of, buffering mechanism that we use inside the communication part, where one is of zero capacity, the queue doesn't have, capacity more than zero. There is a bounded capacity where your length of queue is very limited, so once it gets filled up, it cannot help out in taking more messages until some of them gets deleted. And then we have the third capacity, which is called the unbounded one, and it is kind of a length which is majorly infinite. So any number of messages can be taken up inside it. So these are the three things, and this is all about today's lecture. So this is all about today's lecture, where we have seen the important concept of operating system, that is threads and kernels. After that, we have seen what all are the capacities, what all are the differences between the two, how many types of user level threads and kernel level threads are there. Then we have seen that what is basically IPC, that is inter-process communication, why is it needed, and how does it operate, how and what different type of ways it has got in executing. Then we have seen the inter-process communication, that part where buffering comes in. So we have seen that how buffering acts with the help of naming procedure, and what all are the types. We have seen the zero capacity, we have seen bounded capacity, and the unbounded capacity. So these all are the things that we have covered up today, and I hope all these things are very clear to you. However, I'm going to cover up a little bit of more IPC in the next lecture, because IPC is not this limited concept. IPC is a very huge domain of operating system where a lot many things comes in. the system calls, the remote procedure calls, all these things are a part of interbusiness communication. So this is a huge topic, and I hope I'm going to take it up for the next lecture as well. So we'll cover it up with more some such kind of topics. So for now, I'm just stopping this presentation, and I'm presenting in front of you all the MCQs for today's learning we have done. And I hope you all will be able to answer the questions, the 10 questions very quickly, because we have seen the concepts, and I don't think that you don't have such kind of information and knowledge regarding the threads and the kernels that we have seen today. So you all will be able to answer these questions very quickly. So let us just quickly see all these MCQs. So here are the MCQs for user and kernel threads. Quickly go through it. These are the three set of questions. Please see to it. They are very easy questions. We have already seen what do we call a thread. We all know. We have seen that a process is known to have heavy processes. So the answer is very clear for the question number one. And for the second question, if you remember, I have just represented it with the help of a diagram where I have shown to you that what all are the things that the thread shares with other things. Now, let us take some more questions. Process having multiple thread of control implies let's see question number 6 and question number 7. And here again, question number 8 too. the last set of two questions that we have here is so I hope all the questions are very clear to you and you'll be able to answer all these questions because we have seen the concepts of threads in today's lecture and all these questions are associated with whatever learnings we have done today. So I hope everything will be clear to you. And in tomorrow's lecture, I am going to cover up some more about process communication and the other topics related to it.